Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am excited to be with you once again. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. Hope you had a good weekend. I had a good weekend. My husband and I took the dogs, our little celebrity traveling dogs. Seriously, they get so much attention. It makes me laugh. I know I've said this before, but it makes me laugh how much attention they get here. But we took them to a couple of small villages along the southwest coast of Portugal this past weekend and did a little exploring. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. I spent all of Friday afternoon just walking around going, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. Like everywhere I turned, it was just so beautiful. Which really, really helped. I needed some calm zen for this weekend. I needed to take some time to breathe deeply and look at the beautiful scenery. So I was very grateful that I was able to do so. That was Friday. Saturday, we explored a little fishing village, as well as a much larger town near where we live. And yeah, it was a gorgeous weekend, and I cannot complain about the scenery that I got to experience. So, hope that you had a good weekend as well. But of course, we are here to talk about books and do an author interview. My author today is Verónica Gutiérrez. We are talking about her debut novel. It is called As You Look. It is mystery. It is suspense. Let me give you the description of this book. Former LAPD cop turned private investigator Yolanda Avila blames herself for her mother's death. If only she'd followed her cop instincts instead of the juju, her random prophetic dreams, the perpetrator would have been off the streets and her mother would still be alive. The only salve against her guilt is Yolanda's vow to reject that juju crap and to solve cases using only good, solid detective work. But when her godson is kidnapped and his parents are suspected of murder, Yolanda finds herself caught between what she feels and what she knows. And with the escalation of the case comes the escalation of her dreams until she can no longer ignore their importance. If she wants to overcome the guilt and deal with her pent-up grief, Yolanda must confront the juju and learn to trust its place in her life. If she doesn't, she risks losing yet another loved one, and she can't possibly let that happen. Okay, so that is the description of the book, and from a reader perspective, I love the last sentence in that first paragraph. The only salve against her guilt is Yolanda's vow to reject that juju crap and to solve cases using only good, solid detective work. I could have stopped the description right then and there, and you, as the readers that you are, would have known that of course she's not going to be able to reject that juju crap, that she is going to have to rely on it. And of course, that is what happens. So that's an interesting layer, I thought, in this story. Not only, I'm not calling it juju crap because it's not, but prophetic dreams. She has these dreams, but it's also, if you want to go more basic as to what it is, it's really she has to learn to rely on her instincts as well as her solid detective work, right? She has to learn to trust her instincts and herself. In this case, it's those prophetic dreams. So I appreciated that layer of this book. I also appreciated the relationships in this book. Oftentimes when we have private detectives or private investigators, whether male or female, they are, flawed as everyone is, but often they have really difficult relationships. They might be divorced or have a strained relationship with a spouse. They might have strained relationships with parents, especially female private investigators often have a complicated relationship with a father, at least in the books that I've read, and that's obviously not comprehensive. I haven't read every female private investigator there is, but Yolanda is not only a strong woman, a strong character, but she also has these great, strong, supportive relationships. She has a healthy relationship with her wife, who is supportive and helps her in every way she can, not only with the guilt she feels over her mother's death, but also with the prophetic dreams. She has a good relationship with her father and her brother, and they also are supportive of her and her work, and her brother has some of the same kinds of prophetic abilities, if you will. So I just really found that refreshing. Not every private investigator has to have screwed up relationships, although that is, it's a theme for a reason, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I just appreciated it was a strong woman with good, strong relationships, and I appreciated that. And then, of course, there's also the relationship that she has with her godson's parents and family, and those strong ties as well. Not always something that you encounter with this kind of character. So for me, that was refreshing. At any rate, let me stop rambling at you about relationships and turn to the interview so Veronica can tell you more about the book. Again, it is called As You Look. The author is Verónica Gutiérrez.
Hi, Veronica. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We are here to talk about your book, As You Look. Before we get to that, though, if you would start by sharing a little bit about yourself, I would appreciate it.
Sure. I am a new author, a debut author. I started writing right after I retired early from a corporation. I had always wanted to write, so was able to put together something that I'd been noodling for years. I have put into the book stuff from, I think, my experience in life, if you will. I'm a former community organizer, a former civil rights attorney, former public servant working at the municipal level, and a former corporate executive. So all of those worlds somehow come together and feed little parts of my fiction, if you will. I also come from a large family in Boyle Heights, which is a part of East Los Angeles, the East Los Angeles neighborhood. It has a very rich cultural history, and I feature that in my book as well. So that plays a big role.
Okay, yes, that is the neighborhood in which the book takes place. Not a neighborhood I'm familiar with, so it was fun to get to know it a little bit. Can you give an overview of the story?
Sure. It's about a private investigator who happens to be a former LAPD cop, kind of pushed out of the LAPD, who is dealing with the intersection of grief and guilt and nascent psychic tendencies, if you will. She feels guilty about her mother's death because she had been investigating something that was unrelated to her death, but the perpetrator in a road rage accident was someone that she had been looking for. And she blames herself. So she has a hard time with the guilt associated with that. And she also has these somewhat hit and miss type of psychic dreams that she doesn't really listen to, does sometimes, and tries to ignore because she's a private investigator now, and she has to deal in facts. And she has to come to terms with all of that when her godson is kidnapped and her wife is stalked, and she needs to make sure that she doesn't lose another loved one.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the the abilities or however you want to refer to her dreams and her feelings? Her brother has some similar abilities. Can you talk about why you wanted to include that element within the story?
Sure. It actually came about because I wanted to make sure that it was a story that had a strong relationship. So we actually start with her wife, and I wanted her to wake up from a dream. And if she was going to have a dream, talk about it, she had to have a relationship and have someone she could talk to about it right away. And that kind of sparked some of it. But I think a lot of it also comes from my own life, from the life of people around me who have some similar experiences, if you will, not to the extent that I feature in the book, but there are a lot of moments in all of our lives where there is certain serendipity, if you will, or certain unexplained things, or just luck. And I wanted to be able to feature that somehow. And because of her resistance, I wanted to have someone on the other side, her brother, who was more accepting of this gift, if you will, even though he's a bit hit and miss as well. So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't perceived as something that was perfect either, just something that informed her outlook on life and part of her challenge in dealing with the guilt and the grief that she had to deal with because of her mother's death. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to have something in there associated with what is, I think, fairly common in Latino environments, Latino neighborhoods and communities, where you have what is called a curandera, a healer, a psychic healer, if you will. And that character is actually based on my sister's godmother. And in this instance, she is Yolanda's godmother, Doña Mercedes. And I had a great deal of fun writing about her. She's been a tremendous influence on our family growing up. So I wanted to make sure I featured her as well.
I'm going to cut in here so we can take our first break of the podcast. But when we come back, Veronica and I will be talking more about the juju or the gut feelings or the prophetic dreams or whatever you want to refer to them as, and how those affect Yolanda's character as well as the case and the story. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Verónica Gutiérrez about her first Yolanda Avila detective mystery. This one is called As You Look. Let's go ahead and return now to that interview.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way to kind of get at some of Yolanda's guilt. The main character's name is Yolanda because we all have gut feelings to a certain extent, or instinct, but this is a little bit deeper. So it's interesting to watch her struggle with that, because she does have the guilt over her mother's death. So it really helps to address some of that for her.
Right.
Talk a little bit more about Yolanda as the main character. It's told from her perspective for the most part. What about her do you think will resonate with readers?
Well, I think anyone who likes strong women in books would probably enjoy it. I myself really like reading mysteries with featuring strong women, investigators or police officers, or even in cozy mysteries. As long as the women are strong, I think I tend to gravitate toward them. So that's one thing. I also think that one of the things that will help resonate is that Yolanda isn't a typical private investigator. She's not the gumshoe type of hard knocks type of investigator who's dealing with inner demons, if you will. A lot of characters are. You have a lot of broken characters in the private investigator genre, and that's fine because it gives you a lot of room for character development. But I wanted her to be someone that you could meet on the street and could be a friend, could be a family member. And I also wanted her to have a strong relationship. She has a very strong, positive relationship with her wife, and I wanted that to be portrayed as well because that's not always the case in the LGBTQ community. But it is in the case of a lot of my friends. So I wanted to make sure that came out. In fact, when I was having the book reviewed a little before it was published, I wanted to run it by several people for different aspects of the book. And one of them was an emergency room doctor because I have some emergency room scenes. And he went off and went on vacation. And when he read the book, he sent me an email as he got into it. He said, "I've only read the first chapter so far. And I know this is supposed to be a mystery, but what I'm reading is about a private investigator who loves her wife and whose wife loves her. And I'm loving it." And my first reaction was, "Oh, wait a minute, this isn't a romance." But he got it. He got the strong relationship part of it, and then helped me with the ER scenes. So I'm glad that he liked the book overall and was able to contribute to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about that as you were talking a little bit, that often with private investigators, they do have, if it's a woman, she has a complicated relationship with her father, or she has a complicated relationship with her spouse, or often it's an ex-spouse. And so it's kind of nice to see someone that obviously she still has some issues to work through, as we all do, but to have that support system is kind of refreshing.
Yeah. I enjoyed writing that part of it.
Yeah. And then there are some portions of the story that are also told from Joey's perspective. He's the 6-year-old who goes missing. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to include that perspective as well?
Sure. Because the book is written in first person, the scenes where he is kidnapped, she can't be privy to. So I thought that the only way to do it was to have it done from his perspective. And because he's a child, it was a little different and a little more difficult to write, I thought. But it also added, I think, a little to the tension in the book. And it was probably, for me, the most difficult part of the book to write, just because it's a kidnapping of a child, and it's a hard thing to be able to deal with. So I think that for that reason, and because of the point of view part of the craft, I found it difficult to write. But I think that helped in move the story forward.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to read sometimes as well, simply because you just, even from the everyone's perspective, the kidnapping of child is difficult, and then not giving anything really away, he's kidnapped early in the book, and there's just he follows a puppy, and I in my head I'm like, no, you start to it resonates a little bit more than it might. So what types of research did you do while writing the book?
Well, because the book is based on the neighborhood where I grew up, I didn't have to do a whole lot of research regarding the geography, if you will, or the neighborhood and that community. But Sydney, Yolanda's wife, is an ER doctor, and I wanted to make sure that I had an authentic representation of her job and also the ER scene that I have later in the book as well. And that's for that reason I talked to a couple of doctors, actually, and one of them was just over cocktails at a party somewhere at a friend's house, and he expressed interest in reading the book, and people say that all the time. You don't know if they really want to. And then he kept asking me, well, when am I going to see your manuscript? So I was very appreciative of that. And I also met with a private investigator who is a friend of a friend to learn a little bit more about the kinds of work that private investigators actually do in real life, as opposed to the movies, if you will. And the woman happened to be working in the Bradbury building in downtown Los Angeles, which is a very historic building. And for years, as I've been, noodling this book, I wanted my character to have an office in that building. Had no idea that this woman was there. So it was just one of those coincidences, if you will, that happened as I was writing the book and coming across things that helped move it forward. So I really enjoyed speaking with that private investigator, not just about her job, but about the building itself, which is a building that Yolanda's interested in having an office in.
Mm-hmm. And then how about character development? Do you have a pretty strong idea of your characters before you start? Do they tend to develop more as you write them? How does that work for you in your writing?
Well, I think both happen, but I like to have a good idea of who the characters are, because it makes it easier to write, especially dialogue. You know where they're coming from. You have an idea of what they're like. So some of the characters I've gone much deeper into than others, but I'll do things like, write up for myself biographies of them, what their childhood was like, who their friends were, what motivates them, what are they afraid of, what are their hopes and dreams, if you will. And that's important to do, I think, as a writer. I don't follow a set pattern, if you will. I more than anything, I get a feeling for the character, and I end up liking them quite a bit. But it's even the bad guys, but it's hard to make sure that it's all fiction sometimes, because you're drawing from your life, from people So some of the characters are composite characters of people that I know and have come across. I don't think folks recognize themselves necessarily in the characters that I've written, but pieces of people I know are in there. You can't avoid that as a writer, I think. But yes, I definitely do try to develop the character as much as possible before writing. In fact, I'm working on the second book because this is a series, and I'm having a Japanese character in the book, in the second book, and that's going to be a secondary character. But I want to make sure that it's authentic, so I'm doing a lot of research on that particular character, and I'm almost feeling like I'm getting to know him. So I kind of went through that process with Sydney and Sydney's mother, Yolanda and Jesse, her brother, and her father as well. Those were all very enjoyable.
Time for our second break of the podcast. When we come back, Veronica will be talking a little bit more about some of the characters and that character development. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Verónica Gutiérrez.
I can only imagine for authors that you spend so much time with the characters that they do become fairly real for you as you're writing them and working with them.
You're right, they do. That's why the dialogue becomes natural almost. You know what they're going to say because of their personalities.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you segued nicely to my next question, because this is a Yolanda Avila mystery. So that made me think there's going to be more. Do you have an idea of an overall arc for the series, or are you just going to write as long as you have stories for Yolanda? What are you thinking on that?
Yeah, my initial thought was to have her work on issues that are raised by her motley crew of friends, if you will. I still might do that, but I think I just want to write until I don't have any more stories. And there's just so much to tell. And I'm trying to tie some of the history of Boyle Heights into it as well. You know, some of my favorite novels are those that feature the community as an additional character in the book. You know, Sarah Paretsky's V.I. Warshawski novels do that for Chicago. Cara Black does that with Emma LeDuc in Paris. Cheryl Head does that in her Charlie Mack series in Detroit. And there are many, many others in San Francisco, and writers who focus in LA, New Orleans. And I really gravitate toward those mysteries. So I wanted to make sure that Boyle Heights was a character. So I think as long as there are stories to talk about Boyle Heights, I think I'll keep writing them. Boyle Heights itself was an entry point for many immigrants in Los Angeles, often the first place they landed due to real estate redlining and racism and actually laws that prohibited people from owning property. A lot of immigrants ended up in Boyle Heights before moving to other parts of Los Angeles. So that's part of what's contributed to the rich history there. And I want to be able to depict some of that.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's a work in progress, but is there anything that you can say about the second book without, of course, giving anything away for the first book, or, you know, whatever you're comfortable with sharing about the second book?
Well, the second book will have a character who is a survivor of a Japanese concentration camp in the United States. That's what they're called by a lot of the Japanese activists. And he was a child at the time, so he's an elderly man in this one. And he will be a secondary character. He'll be an important character. The crime will take place in Boyle Heights, and we'll need to explore different elements of human character, if you will, among many of the characters in the book. There's what I really want to get at in that one, and I'm still noodling some of those themes, but the capacity for all of us to do good and to do bad, you know, if not evil as well. Sometimes there's, we think that we are ethical and righteous and all sometimes, and that's not always the case. If you really look at us, you know, we all have the potential to do things that we're not proud of necessarily, and I think that we'll face that in a lot of the characters in this second novel.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate it. You said, I think I remember you saying that you kind of always have wanted to write. So what was the journey to publication like for you? What made you decide to take that step and decide to write for publication?
Well, early retirement for one. When I actually had time to put pen to paper. I had been noodling the book for many years, the story, just the idea of the story. And when I retired, I thought, I just want to read. So that for the first 3 to 4 months, I just read every day, most of the day, and I loved it. And I thought, I really do need to put this book together. And I have a really good friend who encouraged me to explore the publication process. How do you self-publish a book? So I published a journal, a blank journal called My Little Black Cocktail Book that helps people write recipes for their cocktails. When they go to a bar, they can pull it out, and the bartenders, who are usually very generous with their cocktail recipes, can do that. So I had that published as a self-published book. And then I really wanted to focus on writing. And I came across a book by Lisa Cron called Story Genius that focuses on the backstory, the middle of the book, if you will, the aha moment and the ending. And as long as you get those together and the character profiles together, you basically have a path to write the entire book. And she teamed up with a woman named Jenny Nash, who wrote a book called Blueprint for a Book. And before she wrote that, she was doing a lot of workshops for writers that I had the fortune of being a part of, right in the early process. I was just so lucky to come across this. And I got a book coach that Jenny Nash trained to help me move the story forward in a lot of ways. And that was one of the best things I ever did. I would highly recommend that to any writers out there. Get a book coach. They definitely are worth their weight in gold. And if you can't get a book coach, at the very least get The Story Genius by Lisa Cron and Blueprint for a Book by Jenny Nash. It will definitely help you get started, and it will help keep you from making mistakes along the way that will save you a lot of time. But that was essentially where I wrote the book. Then I sent it to a few agents. I went through the whole agent solicitation process. And then I got a lot of positive feedback, several requests for the manuscript. But then the agent said, well, this isn't necessarily the book I think I can sell. So I went directly to the publishers. One publisher held it for quite a while, and I think COVID got in the way. So I sent it to another publisher, Bella Books, and the publisher called me within a week and said, we want to publish your book. So I was thrilled, and that's how the book got published.
Wonderful. I love it. In addition to getting a book coach or getting the books that you recommended, do you have other advice for people who are thinking that they might want to write?
Yeah, I think just do it. Sit down and budget your time and try to stick to it. I was very lucky that I had the time to do this. I would use my mornings. I established a routine, and I was able to get a lot down on paper. And I used, a lot of walks that I took to develop characters in my head, develop dialogue in my head. As a writer, you don't let go of your story just because you're away from the computer. So I would just recommend that you set out your goals to get it done, and then just do it and get it done. Of course, I'm saying that now, and I'm trying to motivate myself to work on this second book as I say that.
Well, sometimes the best advice is the advice we need to give ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
Time for the last break of the podcast. When we come back, Veronica will be talking about what she likes to read. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets Podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets Podcast is for you. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Verónica Gutiérrez.
And then I love your early retirement and 3 to 4 months of solid reading. That sounds heavenly. Who are your go-to authors and genres when you read for yourself?
Well, I think I like mysteries. So the Sarah Paretsky, Carol Bradshaw-Head, Catherine Forrest, and others are among my favorite authors. Trying to think of others off the hand. There are just so many. I also like biographies and memoirs, historical fiction. There's an author named Carlos Ruiz Zafón, who unfortunately passed away, I believe last year or the year before, who writes about a series called Cemetery of Books. And the fourth book in the series, the Labyrinth of the Spirits, was one that I really, really enjoyed. My wife and I both read it and read the entire series. And it's the kind of book where you stop and you say, hey, check out this passage, as you're reading it. And when, a few books do that. So I find that really inspiring. The Elena Ferrante books based in Naples were also quite enjoyable in that way. So varied interest, but I just like to read.
Mm-hmm. Do you and your wife tend to have similar tastes in books, or do you kind of read and share from your differing tastes?
We read and share from our different tastes. She actually prefers short stories. She does she reads a lot of anthologies. I prefer longer novels, but we definitely both share them, and we'll read both, but I read more of the novels and she reads more of the anthologies.
Mm-hmm. Listeners to this podcast will know my long and enduring struggle with short stories. I just want more. I always, if I love a character, I just want more. So I really struggle with short stories.
Yeah, Roxane Gay edited a great one called I think American Short Stories. I can't remember. And she made a great selection of authors for that anthology. It's a very good one.
Nice. So in terms of internet presence, website, and any social media that you're active on? Sure.
On social media, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And all of those links can be found at my website, which is veronicagutierrez.com. That's Veronica, and Gutierrez is spelled GUTIERREZ.com. And all the links are there as well. I probably don't do as much social media as I should, but you'll see me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook from time to time.
All right. Thank you. Veronica, we've talked about the book and we've talked about several different things during our time together, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to mention at this time about the book or writing or anything at all?
I think I want to mention the gratitude to readers. One of the best experiences that I've had as I've gone through this process is coming across readers who really like the book and just really help promote it. They go on social media and do it themselves on their own. And I really have been pleasantly surprised and feel very gratified for that. And I'm also really grateful to folks like you, Sarah, who do the podcast. You guys are all great fans of literature, of writers as well. So thank you to you for the work that you're doing and getting as much information out there for us on what's coming up and what's already there and what we should be reading. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I love getting to know debut authors, especially because doing the podcast, I've discovered so many authors that I may never have come across without this. So it's fun.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you talking to me about the book and writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you once again to Veronica for joining me to talk about this first in the Yolanda Avila Detective Mystery series. Looking forward to more from this character. As I said at the beginning, strong female characters, strong relationships. I really appreciated this particular private investigator story, character, etc. If you're a fan of this genre of private investigators, of female private investigators, of strong women characters, mysteries, detectives, etc., then you should definitely check out this book, and you might have just found yourself a new series to follow and enjoy. I'm also looking forward to seeing how Veronica develops as a character throughout the series, how her relationships continue to evolve, etc. So definitely check out this book and then other Yolanda Avila mysteries as they come out as well. Hope that you will join me next time when I will be joined by Ariane Torres. We will be talking about her debut novel. It is called We Are the Kings, and it is it's a generational story. It's a story of strong women and relationships, and you're just going to have to tune in to find out more about that particular story, or novel, excuse me. So that will be on the next episode. In the meantime, as always, if you are a fan of this podcast, you know what I'm going to ask you to do next. If you haven't done so already, please like, follow, subscribe, etc., so you can get all the podcasts when they come out, so you know when new podcasts come out. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you haven't done so already and are so inclined, please do leave a review, written or starred. Either way, it really helps us to get the podcast out to more listeners such as yourself, listeners who love books, which are really the best kind of listeners, right? Podcast listeners who love books. We're the best. You're the best. And I very much appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far, and I will talk to you next time. But in the meantime, I hope that your week, as always, involves plenty of time for you to get yourself lost in as many good books as you can find time for. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.